Hey, what's up everybody? Tarafdar back with a brand new video. Today we're going to talk about doing credit repair with the CFPB and some of the things that you need to know prior to engaging the CFPB when it comes to your credit repair efforts. Stay tuned. Hey, what's up everybody? Tarafdar back with a brand new video. In today's topic, we're going to talk about the CFPB and what are some of the things that you need to be on the lookout for when it comes to fixing your credit using the CFPB's website and the portal, or even let alone physical communication with them. But before we get started, if you're new to this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing and turning that bell icon on. So every time there's videos like these, which are both informational and educational, you'll be first to be notified. If you're looking to advance your personal credit knowledge, if you're looking to move ahead financially and live a more prosperous and financially rewarding life, then this channel is the right place for you. And with that said, let's get on to today's topic. The CFPB, also known as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What are their roles when it comes to making sure that your credit is assured? And what are also their roles when it comes to making sure that they have that interruptions process that they come in play when it comes to fixing your credit, and the steps when it comes to fixing your personal credit? So the CFPB is basically responsible as a government agency to oversee the financial services sector. The biggest thing when it comes to the CFPB's capability is to ensure that your information is preserved in a most integral way and making sure that systems and laws are being respected when it comes to preserving your financial and consumer level information. The one thing that you have to keep in mind with the CFPB is they're one of the biggest and most powerful agencies within the United States, and the authority they have over the financial services sector is incredible. But the problem is also the fact that it can take some time and understand the systems of how to deal with the CFPB due to its complexity. And what are some of the things you need to do when it comes to fixing your personal credit with that specific information? The biggest thing here is that the CFPB is really responsible to come in as a secondary position, because the initial position is always you have to dispute with the credit reporting agencies. You have to send your letters, you have to communicate with the credit reporting agencies and try to resolve information with them first before the CFPB even steps into the picture. So imagine that, right? So once the CFPB steps into the picture, then you're basically looking for a speedy resolution, but it's not always guaranteed. So I want you to keep that in mind, because a lot of people think that, hey, if I just submit my information to the CFPB and start filing a complaint with them right off the get-go, I'm going to get incredible results fast. And that's not the case. In fact, it's far from the reality, right? The CFPB steps into the picture to ensure that everybody was compliant and following the law. If the credit reporting agencies, or let alone the creditors who are on the other side, or even collection agencies, state that they've been following the law, what happens is the CFPB is not really going to dig deeper, and they'll take their word for it in most cases. However, there are instances that you can actually take advantage of that and be able to provide the enough resources and evidence to be able to back up your situation and your complaint, or let alone the case. So the first thing we need to understand is, why do we have to start complaining with the credit reporting agencies first? What's the rule there? And is it mandatory? Is it going to help me? Is it going to delay the process? Am I going to have to wait longer if I start that process? And the truth is, yes, absolutely. You're going to have to wait longer, but it's the right step to take. And there's two reasons behind that. The first one is there's something called the private right of action. The private right of action is basically an arbitration clause within the credit reporting agencies. Whenever you have access to their databases or information about you, and the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA, states that if you haven't really complained or filed a dispute or communicated with the credit reporting agencies prior to, let's say, a lawsuit of you going after them and suing them for negative information in your credit report, which are potentially inaccurate and are misleading, the courts can actually dismiss that. They can basically say that this was actually part of the FCRA. The credit reporting agencies are protected because they have received no prior communication from you prior to this case happening. So first is resolve it with them first, and then come to us if nothing happens. So that's what happens, right? So that's the first thing you have to understand. It's called the private right of action. It's so important because a lot of people forget about these type of things, and then they just go straight to the CFPB and try to file a complaint. Now, this has nothing to do with legal cases and lawsuits, especially, of course, the CFPB is an online portal. You go there and you lodge the information and you just basically file a complaint there. It has nothing to do with lawsuits. But the reason I'm saying this is because the CFPB is also a placeholder for evidence, right? So if you file a complaint with the CFPB and you have information about the credit reports, let's say if it's TransUnion, Experian, or Equifax respectively, and they're all misleading, right? They have a lot of negative information that's misleading, alleged information, alleged accounts, personal identifiers that are all over the place. that alone kind of jeopardizes the infrastructure of the credit report, right? So if you have that detail, and if you know for a fact that this is actually wrong and there's a lot of misleading information there, and then you go take that information and instead of going and communicating with the credit reporting agencies, let's say you decide to communicate with the CFPB instead, and then you go file a complaint with the CFPB, and now basically that's the first step you took, right? So later down the road, what happens was, of course, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's role is to ensure that the information is being respected and that people are following the law and the credit reporting agencies are within the law. So they'll try to create a resolution for you, and then they're trying to fix that for you. But let's assume that you haven't disputed with the credit reporting agency and you file a complaint with the CFPB, and they say, okay, look, the credit reporting agencies are stating that everything's fine. The creditors are stating that everything's fine. So at this point, there's nothing more that we can do on our side. You have to resolve it with them. So what ends up happening is you've just wasted time, right? Because you haven't really armed yourself properly to communicate with the CFPB. So that's the thing you have to understand. So instead of starting with the CFPB, start with the credit bureaus. And I always teach you guys the methods, right? You have the PI minimizer technique, you have the item anchoring, and then you have the 15-day power surge. There's a reason why there's a system to it. And the 15-day power surge is essentially communicating with the CFPB to get rid of the negatives that are sticking there, because nobody has been doing anything about it and there was no resolution that were created yet. So in order to successfully execute the 15-day power surge, you absolutely need to make sure that you have done item anchoring. In order to do item anchoring properly, you need to make sure the personal identifiers have been engaged already. And this is how the system works. The personal identifiers, in a very systematic way, is basically you have a lot of personal details that are there. First and last names, middle initials, and a mix of other information that's there that's potentially misleading or inaccurate or no longer relevant. So with that specific information, the first role should always be to make sure that the report is comprised of whatever data that's 100% accurate about you specifically. Now, if there's other names and individuals out there on your credit report at the beginning of the sections of each credit report that's on personal identifiers, then that means that the entire report itself is comprised of other people's data potentially, right? Which can be compromising your personal credit. So this is why we start with the PI minimizer technique. This is why we start with that journey first. Once we've successfully completed the PI minimizer technique, once we've challenged them and the items are coming off and the names are coming off and the addresses and all that good stuff, the next step is, okay, well, based on this information from the credit reporting agencies, our next step is to ensure that the negative items that are on my report, these information that's being put about me here, is not corresponding to somebody that the credit reporting agency just removed and confirmed that there was a mistake, right? That's the link, and that link is called the item anchoring. And you're anchoring the negatives to a person that's been going on your credit report for a long time, but all of a sudden is now gone, so that all the negative items, or let alone the entire credit report's infrastructure, can now be questioned. That's what you do. Now, let's say you challenge those negative items using the item anchoring, and it doesn't move, and it's not budging, and you're basically stuck with all these negative items on your credit report. What's the next thing you do? And that's where the 15-day power surge comes in. And the 15-day power surge logic is very, very easy to understand. Because the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB in this case, what they do is they take your information and they try to give you a speedy resolution, typically 15 days. Sometimes the credit reporting agencies, due to the fact that an agency is involved, such as the government, can actually work in your disadvantage. They can say, well, they have up to 60 days now to investigate, regardless of the FCRA regulations and rules. So there is a chance that if you start investigating right off the get-go with the CFPB, you'll fall into that 60-day timeline. Now you basically put yourself in more agony than more frustration rather than getting the results that you're looking for. So that's why you start with the first few steps: the PI minimizer, communicate with the credit bureaus, the item anchoring, and then the 15-day power surge. Because by that time, you have sufficient evidence that the credit reporting agencies were either negligent, they're not complying to the laws, they're misreporting information, all this information is inaccurate, and you have evidence of that. And the fact that they removed these personal identifiers shows the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is the most powerful government agency when it comes to financial services, that this specific credit reporting agency is not following the rules, they're breaking the laws, and there's potential violations of all the other negative information in your credit reports, which needs to be looked into. So when that starts and when that process begins, you have a lot more success because you're armed with the information and evidence to be able to use that against the credit reporting agencies. So I want you to keep that in mind. That's the first thing we have to do, right? Again, just to lay out the game. First, PI minimizer, which is information about how to challenge the personal identifiers that are on your credit report to make sure that they're not comprising of other people's information and compromising your report. Second is the item anchoring, taking the negative items or the alleged information that's there that can potentially be other people's information and connecting it with the personal identifiers that the credit reporting agencies themselves have removed. and then communicating with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau if nothing else works, stating that here's evidence of the credit reporting agencies confirming that the information that was there was wrong. However, they're not willing to budge on the rest of the details, and I feel that I'm highly compromised, and therefore I'm needing for you to please do a speedy resolution on this, because I need to be able to access my credit, and this is actually hurting me more than it's doing me good. And that's when the CFPB steps in and says, you know what, we're going to do this on a very serious level, and let's see what we can do. So that's the strategy, right, of how to dispute and do credit repair with the CFPB or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So if you guys understood the context here, let me know in the description below that you actually learned this process for the first time, or that you knew this. Leave a comment below and say, yes, I knew this, Ali, or thank you, Ali, it was great information and I learned something today. Okay, so with that said, if you're new to this channel and you haven't subscribed and you've been watching me for a while, consider subscribing and turning that bell icon on, so every time there's educational content such as this, you'll be first to be notified. If you guys liked it, give me a thumbs up. Once again, leave a comment. Like I said, let me know if you're into this information. If you learned something new, I would greatly appreciate that. And share this information with those individuals that have been thinking about credit repair, have been thinking about the CFPB, or let alone the credit reporting agencies. They're frustrated. They can actually use this information. You'll do them a huge solid. All right. So with that said, if you guys, once again, are new, don't forget to subscribe. Just a reminder, turn the bell icon on so I can see you next time when the new video is released. And with that said, I hope you guys are staying safe and sound, taking care of yourselves and taking care of your financial health as well. With that said, this is your guide and mentor, Ali Tarafdar. Catch you guys in the next one. Bye for now.